first article is about that how the Taliban and the Islamic State, they are posing threats to the security of Afghanistan. Okay, so in the past few days, I mean, in within the period of 10 days, there have been four attacks, and in which two have been claimed by Taliban and two by the IS. Okay, see, the thing is, the IS and Taliban, they are opposed to each other in the complex conflict landscape, because they have their own interpretations of I mean, what kind of rule they want. Even the interpretation of Sharia, both have different interpretations, and both are somewhat competitors kind of. Though definitely they are opposed to each other, but they share a common goal, and that is to destabilize the state that has been built since 2001 and throw the country into further chaos. Okay, so the thing is this. Now, in recent years, see, Afghanistani government has claimed that it has cracked down on militants, and but the thing is that we have seen that the threats from not only Taliban but IS is also increasing. The IS, okay, it is losing. In fact, almost lost its territory in Iraq and Syria, and it's trying to build network somewhere else. And what else fertile ground it can get, and that is war-torn Afghanistan. Okay, because it's very easy for someone to capture a place which is already very unstable. Okay, because that instability, this instability, especially the political instability, which we are going to see further in this article, it breeds ground for this kind of this producing such kind of terrorist outfits and non-traditional threats. So the thing is that these groups, they are attacking mainly they're targeting Shia minority in Afghanistan. Okay, earlier Taliban said that it was targeting only Afghan military facilities and soldiers and not civilians, but the recent attack on the ambulance, okay, it killed more than 100 people, civilian people. So it shows that the things which the Taliban is saying, it's basically contrary to what actually the reality is. Okay, now the issue is that the Afghan government is caught in a classic security bind. Okay, issue is that whatever the government has done, it has basically entrenched these entire security crisis. It has not solved the problem, rather it has somewhat this destabilized the entire condition. And the reason behind is the protracted war and the indiscriminate use of air power by US, which has turned a substantial portion of the rural population away from Kabul. See, because of the war, because of this indiscriminate use of power by some foreign authority, so what is it has done, that many of the rural population, fine, they are now vulnerable in the hands of these Talibani groups. They give them not only jobs, they provide them food, they provide them the basics necessities. So definitely they'll be more inclined to these terrorist outfits instead of the government, right? So because of this, the group now controls almost a third of the country. Okay, we can imagine that one third of the country is under Taliban. Okay, so it's like it's a reality that Taliban is now too strong to be defeated outrightly, but not that strong enough to unseat the government in Kabul. And this is the stalemate situation the war has entered, that we cannot defeat Taliban altogether, but at the same time Taliban cannot unseat the government. Okay, some sort of stagnation has stagnation is there in the security policy in Afghanistan. And the since the announcement the US government made that we will increase our troops in Afghanistan, Taliban has increased its attacks. So it is a kind of message to Washington, see, your hard power, your military power is not going to be a solution, and if you do so, we are going to attack more. So this is the message they are trying to give to US. Okay, And even USA has adopted some hard line on Pakistan as well, because Pakistan is not mending its ways and is providing support to these groups. Okay, so USA has somewhat stopped its aid as well, but these things are appearing as if there is no effect on Taliban of these activities, whatever US is trying. And there is another problem, the lack of cohesive strategy. Majorly, two problems are there in Taliban. The first is that US is focusing too much on the military aspects of the problem, that will increase troops and all in all, will send these kind of ammunitions and all. So US is focusing more on the hard power, that means the military power. And at the same time, the Afghani government is, it is plagued by its political instability because of corruption and infighting, because we know that in Afghanistan we have President Ashraf Ghani on one hand and his CEO Abdullah on other hand. So these two people, they are somewhat competitors. It was a compromise kind of negotiation, that one was made CEO and the other was made president, but that competition is there. So instead of working for the country and instead of trying to fight with the Taliban, cooperating each other, they are somewhat fighting with each other also. So this is the kind of political instability situation which is there in Afghanistan. And these Talibani networks and people, they are basically utilizing this political instability and creating fertile grounds for themselves. So this is the challenge that Afghanistan is undergoing right now, and entire advantage is of Taliban. So definitely this entire Afghanistan security issue needs to be looked on. Apart from this article, security in Afghanistan is also critical for stability and security in entire South Asia region, especially for India. Okay, so this must be kept in mind. So this was with this article. Next article is again with the India and Asian ties, and this article is saying that it's now time to draw up a to-do list, okay, and begin the heavy lifting in India and Asian ties. Okay, so the article is saying that the recent summit, okay, and the Delhi declaration that we had on the India and Asian relationship, it somehow sets a path and it provides ample clarity on what our partnership is to be and what our way, okay, what our path will be in this partnership and where it should move in the future. Okay, so the thing is this, that this particular summit is a clear indication that what our path will be with respect to the relationship of India and ASEAN. Okay, so the article is saying that there is enough scope for cooperation. Okay, and this cooperation will be on the basis of mutual advantages. Okay, on one hand, where ASEAN is getting benefited, India too needs ASEAN. Okay, so both need, I mean, this is a mutual cooperation. Matlab, it's like both are trying to extract the comparative advantages from each other. Okay, so why India is important to ASEAN? Okay, uh, in recent years, India is viewed as a benign power, and huge scope exists to develop cooperation with it. Okay, so it was a message which the Asian nations deliver on our Republic Day. They see India as a benign power and they see a lot of scope of cooperation within the two, I should say, within India and ASEAN. Okay, now what prompted Asian nations to engage more constructively with India? There should be some factor behind it, that why they need India. It's because, see, Asian nations, they are more culturally aligned towards China, and they respect Chinese economic progress. Every Asian nation it respected, but the thing is that China's assertiveness, Beijing's assertive diplomacy, then it's assertiveness in the South China Sea. It's having issues with many of the Asian nations like Philippines, Vietnam, okay, even with Malaysia. So so it's having issues with all these nations which are obviously Asian nations. Okay, so this has some, and apart from that, US, which was earlier, somewhat trying to balance out China in this area in Asia Pacific, it after it withdraws from TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, so it and is now following a trend of protectionism, as we know, under Trump's administration. So the thing is that these nations, they know there is a huge, I should say, trust gap between USA and these nations now, and China is also being more assertive. So what option they left with? Obviously India. So this all these things, they have impelled Asian states to expect and encourage India to enhance its role as a balancer in the region. Okay, India could act as a balancer in the region. Okay, now, so this was the importance of India for ASEAN. Now, why ASEAN is important for India? For India, ASEAN is of vital importance both for strategic as well as economic considerations. Okay, see, we need new market. We want to tap all those untapped markets in this Southeast Asia. Okay, in fact, many of the countries like Philippines, with Philippines, India was not having that much proper relationship compared to other Asian nations. So we have to tap those markets, and strategic concern is also there because we have to somehow balance China also, because we are seeing increasing presence of China in Indian Ocean region. So we are just one can say that it may be an approach of balancing out China or encircling China kind of thing. Okay, so the thing is that we are having economic and strategic considerations. Now, see, the constants and setbacks which India is facing in South Asia, in the form of Pakistan, okay, how we are not, we are trying to isolate Pakistan, and the kind of terrorism Pakistan is promoting and propagating. So we are not on the good lines with even with Nepal right now. Somewhat, misunderstandings are going on, and there are more Chinese now, especially on the Madhesi issues. So we are having somewhat setbacks in South Asia, and but we are seeing opportunities in Southeast Asia. So this have led to a blur the traditional distinction between immediate neighborhood and extended neighborhood. Actually, the thing is that the South Asian nations, Nepal, Bangladesh, and all these nations, they are our immediate neighbors. But when we talk about these nations, they are our extended neighbors. But the kind of constraints and challenges we are facing in our relationship with South Asian nations, this has basically blurred the kind of distinction between these two terms, the immediate neighbors and the extended neighbors, and we are looking beyond South Asian nations, and that is Southeast Asia. Okay, so this is the importance of ASEAN for India. Now, the thing is that there are certain key areas on which the Delhi Declaration was done, and some key areas were chalked out. जैसे कि for example, first we have this political and security operation. So, in this political and security operation, we are having two themes. The first is the freedom of navigation. Okay, freedom of navigation and overflight. That means we have to increase the connectivity with this Asian region, and we have to ensure the freedom of navigation in the this especially in the South China Sea, because we know that China is being assertive in South China Sea. Okay, and it has also set up its I guess air defense related militarized zone in the South China Sea. So definitely India, because India wants to act as the balancer in that region, so India is going to this propagate this the entire concept of freedom of navigation. Okay, now, apart from that, India's support to Asian nations, the same thing, the India's support to Asian efforts to obtain a legally binding code of conduct with China in the South China Sea. India will definitely, because it's trying to be a balancer, so it's definitely going to develop a code of conduct with China in the South China Sea. And on the this economic cooperation, definitely the trade and economic cooperation, that's going to be onto a new level, and India has to utilize this Asian and India free trade area. apart from that, India has to conclude this RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and it is basically being delayed because of India's concerns regarding Chinese goods, that if India enters into RCEP, then because China is also there, then it will flood the Indian market with the Chinese products. So this concern has to be taken care of. And so, but the we have read in the newspaper that the Singapore Prime Minister or President, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit confused. Anyway, so in means the he's saying that India should somehow try to early conclude the RCP agreement. So because India has no option now, so it has to somehow conclude the RCEP agreement after getting into some sort of negotiations with the with this Asian nation. Some sort of bargaining is required there. And regarding socio-cultural cooperation, what is to be done? Obviously, we have to enhance our cultural exchanges. And this Thailand's foreign minister, he emphasized on a term, this is a new term, moral connectivity, and which places people at the center of interstate relations. Okay, it's like, means whatever your decisions are, whatever decisions countries are taking, that people should be at the forefront. Okay, this is the moral connectivity. And our prime minister, in its speech, included Islam in the list of common bonds, because we generally say that we have 2000-year long cultural linkages with Southeast Asian nations on the basis of Buddhism and Ramayana and all. But we should take care of this thing, that Indonesia is the largest Muslim country having Muslim population, so we have to take care of this also. And India too have the second largest community of Muslims. So in our prime minister included Islam in the list of common bonds together with the Ramayana and Buddhism. So this is how we are trying to establish our cultural linkages. So the next is that the declaration commits the parties to enhance physical and digital connectivity as well, and it's high time that India should begin its hard work. Okay, so this was the entire article on India and ASEAN relations. This article is regarding that what economic survey has shown and what economic survey is trying to indicate or trying to give direction to the coming budget. Okay, so the thing is, the writer is saying that economic surveys has always been a kind of scorecard of the the current fiscal year, but in a few years back, like from last 2 years, it has been a source of policy analysis and as well. And many academicians and scholars, they try to look to it, you know even though this economic survey, it may have somewhat influence of the ruling party as well, it may have a partisan outlook as well, but then we cannot ignore the importance of economic survey. Now, there are certain sober realities with respect to 2017-18 economic surveys. And under the leadership of present Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramaniam, the survey has some sort of thematic catchphrases. For example, if we see that the last year survey in 2016, yeah, no, in 2016 there was a catchphrase, this JAM. It means Jandhan, Aadhaar, and mobile tritony. That how with the help of Jandhan we can have financial inclusion, then we can have Aadhaar, okay, to enable the direct benefit transfers, and with this mobile, that means with the use of technology, how we are going to have the targeted delivery of the subsidies, okay, and how we are going to plug out the leakages. So this was all about this jam tritony. Okay, so it means that some sort of catchphrases are also being used in the survey. And in this economic survey 2017 and 18, it has highlighted 10 new facts about the economy. Means survey has said that these are the 10 new facts, but the reality is that many of the facts which is being given in the survey, they're not so new. However, some are new. So, for example, what facts are not new? Like that the adverse weather affects agriculture yield. We know that. Okay, we know that climate change and adverse weather definitely affect crop yield, and it's not a new fact. And that parents, they prefer, boys over girls. Everybody knows that. Okay, it's a perennial problem. So parents, they have a preference for male children. Obviously they are not new facts, but yes, there are others which are very significant, and that says that demonetization and more formalization of the economy have led to a huge jump in the number of taxpayers. That means there is, increase in the number of taxpayers, and both for direct as well as indirect as well. Okay, but the thing is that this particular finding is not being substantiated by enough data, and survey is depending on the data of 2012 only. So this is the thing. Another interesting fact in the survey, it's saying that the India's export sector is too diversified in comparison to other peer countries, because here the export is not limited to the top 1% exporting units. We do have contribution from our small and medium scale enterprises as well. So this is also another interesting fact. However, so these are some of the realities which are given in the survey regarding this increase in tax base, both direct and indirect, and this India's exports are quite diversified, and we have a huge contribution of small and medium scale industries. Apart from that, survey is also hinting towards the populist measures that the government may take, considering it as a pre-election year. Okay, so, see, one of the most sobering facts in the survey has been on the rural and agricultural sector. Okay, as I have told earlier, also, I guess, that there are three areas where focus should be there according to survey, and that are agriculture, employment, and education. So survey has focused a lot on the agricultural distress. So the issue is that what is the prospect of doubling farm incomes in the next few years? And given that the budget will be the last before the 2009, see, we are having 2019 this Lok Sabha elections. Okay, so obviously the budget which will come, it tend to have some sort of populist policies or populist kind of measures can be seen in this budget. Okay, and it is almost a foregone conclusion that there will be great emphasis on the farm sector. This also means a tilt towards populism. This is survey is hinting towards. So obviously, how then will the fees limits be obeyed? And if government is moving towards this populist measures, okay, like we have loan waivers and these kind of things, so obviously there will be a feasal slippage. Whatever our feasal targets are, definitely will fall down on that. Okay, so the issue is the bond markets, they hate this feasal slippage. Okay, so because now what happens that the government, it has to think on all these issues. The government has to think very carefully that how to avoid this feasal slippage and keep bond markets intact. Okay, but the other reality and the other achievement survey is appraising is that the disinvestment was overachieved this year, and which is quite impressive. Okay, the next problem that survey is pointing towards is that okay, our stock markets is soaring high right now, and it's not just it's not happening only in India. It's a global phenomena right now. Stock markets at the global level, they are at record high. So survey is definitely concerned about that it's a kind of bubble formation. Okay, and there may be some sort of meltdown, and when so it may be because of oil prices or commodity prices which are high, and the new stock markets which are going up. So they you can say that as a big surge before a crash. What it means to say is that these kind of soaring high in the stock markets, at the global level it may be a bubble, and when this bubble will it will just spill out, then there will be a huge crash on the economies. But in India, the condition is quite different. In India, it may not be the case that it's in a bubble territory, but that is why the disinvestments for next year may be higher. But the issue is we have some sort of global factors which needs to be taken care of. The first is that oil prices are going up. This we have discussed earlier also, so definitely government has to keep an eye over it, because for every $10 barrel, for every $10 increase in oil prices, a GDP growth it reduces by 0.2 to 0.3%. Okay, and that's why this oil prices they have gone up by almost 60% in the last 6 months, so definitely a matter of concern. The second matter of concern comes from the tightening stance of the world's obviously this US central bank. They'll be following a tighter monetary policy, so it may be the case that there will be outflow of capital from Indian stock markets. So it's a huge concern for India as well, these two factors. And in addition, apart from these two external factors, we have some domestic challenges as well. Okay, budget has certain five areas. So these areas which budget has prioritized, these are also sort of challenges for us. They are job creation, revival of private investment, then we have revival of exports, focus on rural and agricultural economy, and bringing the banking sector back to a healthier condition, for which government is also trying to recapitalize the banks. So these are challenges, these are areas on which in government needs to keep an eye over it, and the government needs to make efforts in this direction. Apart from that, world economic for this the kind of inequality is also increasing, and Oxfam report is it has showed that 1% of Indians own 73% of its wealth. In fact, this inequality has increased manifold. And one cause of inequality is the strain of indirect taxes. Matlab, the thing is because indirect taxes is on the commodities. Okay, for example, if we buy something, a pencil or a pen, so a 10 rupees pen will be a 10 rupees pen for a rich as well as for a poor. So it doesn't distinguish between that he is a rich or he is a poor. On the other hand, when we talk about direct taxes, it's on the income. Okay, it's proportional to your income. The higher you earn, the higher the taxes are. So the indirect taxes, they're regressive on the poor. So that's why, because and as I have told earlier in this reality section, that our tax collection has increased both in respect of direct taxes as well as in respect of indirect taxes. So when indirect taxes are increasing, that means what? Poor are more sufferer, okay, because indirect taxes are regressive in nature. So this is the cause of increasing inequality in our society. Okay, we have said that because of GST the indirect taxes has increased, and GST is a kind of indirect tax. Second thing, the excise duties that we have on petrol and diesel, they are indirect taxes. So and in the last 3 years, the share of indirect taxes in total taxation has gone up steadily. So obviously there is an expectation that there will be an action on the direct tax front to correct this trend. We have to increase our direct taxes, not the indirect one. Okay. Apart from this, survey is also pointing out towards the tax disputes. Survey is saying, okay, India has moved up in its ease of doing business, but where India is lacking is the settlement of disputes or litigation. We are having many cases in the form of litigation. Matlab, much of our, this taxes money in the form of taxes is impending just because cases are pending in the tribunals or in court. Okay, and one of the major party to these tax litigants will be definitely the income tax department and many a times government. The survey is pointing towards this tax litigations as well. And the problem is that we do not try to give incentive to those tax officers, who try to settle out these issues, because they are of the fear that if we try to settle any sort of tax issue as early as possible, then there will be accusations of collusion or corruption. So these officers are also, not encouraged enough, कि we have to just settle out this issue or not. So they are just keeping it pending and pending and pending. Other apart from that, this is, hurting India's ease of doing business as well. So another statistics is the pendency in settling of granting of patents as well. So a lot of cases are pending with respect to this as well. So the survey is overall an excellent document which doesn't shy away from painting a realistic picture. I mean, survey has shown us the sober reality. Survey has also pointed towards that what that yes, the government can move towards the populist measures, considering in mind that we are having 2019 as the election year. Then survey is also pointing towards the increase in inequalities and what the government should do in the budget so that these indirect taxes, they may reduce and direct tax collection may increase, as well as survey is pointing towards the tax litigations, because of which a lot of our money is pending within this tax litigations. So this was about this economic survey. There is one more article. This article is also pointing towards that as the tax base widens, the finance minister should cut the share of indirect taxes, one in the same thing. But let us just look at briefly that survey is saying that there are large gains on the indirect and direct tax fronts, indicating the primary intentions behind. That means the survey is saying that the two big bang, economic strides, what were they? Of formalizing the economy and bringing more income into the income tax net, they have met to some extent, and thus because of that we have, huge tax collection on in comparison to previous years. So the survey is saying that number of tax filers rose by 10.1 million since the note ban. So it's if we have to somewhat there are many criticism of demonetization. So if we have to somewhat counter that, no, demonetization was good, indeed good. So we can quote this fact that, see, after demonetization the number of tax filers rose by 10.1 million. This is to be quoted in answer whatever the ground reality is. Okay, so apart from that, survey finds a 50%, this is all data, you need not to look into that. The survey finds a 50% increase in unique indirect taxpayers in the first 6 months of GST. See, regarding GST, the survey says that because when the GST came, so the number of taxpayers, they also enhanced. Okay, and with around 10 million registered taxpayers now compared to an estimated earlier it was 6.5 million pre-GST, I'm talking about indirect taxpayers, and now it's around 10 million registered taxpayers. So the survey is telling that although earlier GST regime had some sort of initial chinks, but it ended up in boosting India's macroeconomic stability by breaking up what the survey terms inertia of the tax to GDP ratio. See, the survey is saying that okay, initially GST is it had some problems and it is having some problems, but in the long run it will definitely boost up the India's macroeconomic stability by increasing our tax to GDP ratio. See, tax to GDP ratio will increase. Our GDP is increasing. We are having, sufficient economic growth. But the problem is that the tax to GDP ratio is less for India because our tax collection is not up to the mark. Okay, the tax base which we are having, the tax collection which we are having is not in proportion to the tax base we are having, and so the tax to GDP ratio is definitely quite low compared to our GDP. So the survey is hinting that in future we are definitely going to have increased tax to GDP ratio. So the survey is suggesting that this we need to fix exporters GST woes and continue to ease the transition pains under its new features such as e-way bills to deter evasion would be critical to attain the 7 to okay. As I told yesterday, that survey is pointing towards that we'll be having 7 to 7.5% of economic growth in the coming 2018 and 19 year. It's a projected economic growth, but what is critical for this growth is that we have to ease out the GST, the kind of taxation rules and regulations within the GST. It needs to be, the problems with the exporters regarding GST, they needs to be eased out. So only then we can have this kind of economic growth. And apart from that, the government needs a roadmap to expand the direct tax pie by pruning blanket exemptions for vocations such as farming and using a more proactive big data driven approach to target evaders. So the survey is saying we have to increase our direct tax collections by removing all sorts of irrational exemptions that we try to give in the form of different sorts of in the form of different sorts of subsidies which we give in farming, okay, which are definitely not rational right now. And we have to use proactive big data where the entire data, it's a kind of centralized database system, so we have to use this big data driven approach to target evaders of tax, okay. So this way and apart from this also, the government, one thing is there, see, if you need to increase your tax collection, so you need to reward those people at least who are paying, reward them na, so that they may be encouraged more and others may be encouraged also. So it's right that you have to increase your direct tax collection, you have to catch those tax evaders, but please reward the those who are complying with the tax and who are paying their taxes properly. We can give them relief in the budget, and we can in the form of slashing high duties on petroleum products, okay. So the thing is that we have to reward those who are complying, and we have to somehow reduce the indirect taxes. And how we can do so? We can reduce the duties on the petroleum products, because it's the indirect taxes which pinches the poorest the most, okay. So this was all about today's article.